Welcome back, everybody, to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and today we're going to talk about the biggest county in Kentucky, Pike County. With me here, I have today a Pike County resident, along with deep family ties in Pike County, Mr. Roger Ford. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Absolutely.
We're here to pick your brain. You know, I don't know the most about Pike County. I correct myself. I've been to Pike County one time, and I can't even think of the name of the community I went to. I know it was in the bottom eastern part of Pike County, right next to Virginia.
Elkhorn City.
That's it. Yep, that's it. There you go.
You went to the breaks, I bet.
Yeah. So you get plenty of Pikeville knowledge, or Pike. I always say Pikeville, Pike County, but we're talking about Pike County today. And of course, Pikeville will come up, but a few basic information. Pike County was the 80th county formed in Kentucky. It's the farthest in the east. The county seat is now Pikeville, and we'll talk a bit more about that here in a second. And anyway, so that's that. Mr. Ford, tell us a little bit about your connection to Pike County and just your family ties there.
Yeah, so my family, like a lot of families here, settled in this area, well, even before actually we become a state. We just actually celebrated out last week Kentucky's 200th and
is it 30?
1792. So 1792. I've majored in history and political science. I'm not a math major.
Yeah, we're doing math on
I think
the
it's
spot.
200. Yeah, so 229 29 years.
There you go.
So June 1st, 1792, birthday of Kentucky. We settled in this area. Our families did. My family did. Both my mother and father's family, before Kentucky was even a state. Wow,
that's pretty good roots. Pretty good family tie.
Yeah,
there.
and So we're, I guess technically we're sons and daughters of Virginia before we became sons and daughters of Kentucky.
Yeah.
But that being said, and then of course Pike County didn't become a county in and of itself until 1821. We're actually celebrating our 200th 200th birthday.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, this year. So, and not much is said about that for some reason.
Yeah.
Our local officials, I think it's kind of odd that that they're not talking about that.
Yeah, it would be a great thing to promote for the county. You say 200 years.
Well, with tourism and a little bit of everything else, right? I mean, to kind of see where we are and where we started. That being said, I grew up here in a community called Ford's Branch.
Okay.
FORDS, named for my family, because my family settled that area right during and after the Revolution.
Oh, cool.
And my great grandfather received a land grant for his service in during the Revolution, as several people in this area did after that. So Ford's Branch is a unincorporated little community just about 7 miles south of Pikeville on US 23 now. Goes right through the middle of it, US 23. We have our own post office at Ford's Branch.
Gotcha. Well, that sounds official. That's official then.
It's official. And somebody, a member of my family, was the postmaster and has been the postmaster there since I think it was started in 1903. So
wow, that's cool.
Over 100 years. So yeah, that's kind of a unique thing. And there's lots of those little, not as many as there used to be, but still a lot of those little towns. But I grew up there. My mother worked for, at the time, Southern Bell, became South Central Bell, became Bell South.
Yeah.
All part of the AT&T family, and then was busted up in the 80s. My father taught 7th and 8th grade math and science at Greasy Creek Elementary, where I went to grade school. I went to 3 schools growing up. I went to Shelbyana Grade School, as to kindergarten. When I started in the first grade, I went to Greasy with
Cool.
my dad, and I went 8 years there, and then I went to Mullins High School and graduated from Mullins. Attended the University of Kentucky until I transferred to what is now the University of Pikeville College, which is our local college here. I was working for actually my cousin, the former Supreme Court Justice Will Scott. He ran for Congress in 1988, and I actually worked for his campaign while going to college, doing research and on certain public policy issues, defense and policy, and that sort of thing. I'd write briefing papers and that sort of thing. So, so I transferred back to Pikeville College and graduated there in 1992.
Oh, cool.
With a double major, history and political science.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's nothing about what I do now. Yeah, as most people, you go to college to get a degree, and then you go do what you really
you go do
should have been doing all along.
You go do something.
So I actually for a number of years ran a political consulting firm and public relations.
Yeah.
I worked in Frankfort as a legislative aide in the early and up into the mid 90s during the sessions. A few legislators there and one in particular, a guy that I went to college with, and worked as a legislative aide with them, and then did political consulting work on the national, the state, and the local level for about 20 years. I then went into the nonprofit sector and development work, and became interested in alternative energy, the use of biomass and all that kind of thing. Coming from a big coal producer, but and have worked in the natural gas business for myself, and actually currently we're developing and building a bioenergy facility in Mississippi.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So we'll produce crude oil from industrial hemp and other biomass.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So, a little bit of everything there on the resume, but all in all, I've always maintained a great interest in history and politics and in this country and then this state. Yeah, it's always an interesting subject.
Well, and
Kentucky politics is very very interesting.
It is, and we've had some looking back in history, we've had some interesting times in Kentucky. Politics history, and well, just history in general as well. But there's some good stories out there. Now you have very deep ties, obviously, in Pike County. You could even say your family was some of the founders of Pike County, if you want to label it that way. You brought up that Pike County was formed in 1821. I was just going to throw out some a fact here for the listeners. It was originally part of Fayette, and then Bourbon, then Mason, and then Floyd. So that was kind of the progression of Pike County being formed. But it is one of the biggest counties in Kentucky. Now, I'll ask you this question, and I mean, why do you think it's one of the biggest? Or why do you think it is the biggest? I mean, I keep on saying one of the biggest. It is the biggest.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know why our landmass is so big. You'll hear numbers ranging anywhere from 774 to 785. I've seen all those through, officially, I think it's around 775, square miles. That's fairly significant in terms of landmass. Whether it's true or not, I don't really know, but they compare us to states like Rhode Island and Delaware, some of the smaller states. I don't know that we're as big as a state, possibly, we're close, but I can't. I've seen, measurements of those states, and I don't think we're quite that big, but we're big.
Yeah.
And we kind of make like that triangle. It's kind of a triangle shape that juxtaposes us against both West Virginia and Virginia. All of which were part of Virginia. At one time. So I don't really know why that is. There's the folklore here that when they were doing the survey, that the two surveyors over on the Tug Fork, and we have two tributaries here that feed into the Ohio River, the Tug Fork of the Big Sandy and the Levasseur and Russell Fork of the Big Sandy. So we actually have three, but the story goes that those two surveyors were over on the Tug Fork, and you got to understand that's a pretty mountainous
area,
steep, terrain, right, to get around it. And for some reason, they did not do the boundary ride. The story is they were drinking, they got drunk, and they didn't really, and they were, I guess, instead of driving drunk, they were surveying drunk. and so they took in part of what should have stayed in Virginia, and it ended up in Pike County in Kentucky, or, in Kentucky at the time. So, and you can kind of see that because there's areas over there where you bounce in and out of West Virginia and back into Kentucky. Anyway, and that was kind of typical, right? That the rivers were boundaries. Yeah, think about it. I mean, the Ohio River runs the whole northern boundary of the state of Kentucky, right? Right down the center of the river. So it would stand to reason that that may be true. I don't know. But anyway, so we ended up being a fairly large county, but at that time it was part of, as you said, Fayette, the first 6 original counties in Kentucky. So I don't know exactly how the powers that be, when those divisions were made from Mason County to Floyd County and then from Floyd to Pike, I don't know how they kept Pike County so large. And I never have thought to really ask or anybody to speculate as to why that is. But we are large in terms of land mass.
And I think this is a bit, they even took Martin County out of Pike County.
They did. And Martin County was part of Pike County. And I've got family in Martin County. Distant relatives in Martin County, and I've got distant relatives in Floyd County. But yeah, Martin County came after Pike County, and they split that off. And so if you look at Martin County and Pike County, that's an even bigger piece that they left intact for some reason. So so I don't know why. There's always been this, in my lifetime, discussion about downsizing counties, right? Reducing this from 120 to something more manageable, especially in some of these smaller
less counties. Populated counties. Yeah, there's some that are very small.
It just for terms a matter of efficiency and cost of all that. But in terms of Pike County, I think maybe we should have been split up or something. It puts a stress on the local government to try to maintain all the roads and all things that you typically do with a county. So that's an odd one why we're so large, and it's hard for people in other parts of the state, especially in your part of the country, in Lincoln County and places, when you talk about, well, let's run over here. Let's go over here to this part of the county. Like you'll get in the car and you'll drive to some other part of Lincoln County, and it takes you what?
10 minutes?
10 minutes, 20 minutes to cover that. Okay, if I decided today, right now, let's say I'd say, well, let's take a ride over to Majestic, or Woodman, or Paw Paw.
Not going to happen.
That would take me about 2 hours.
Yeah, wow. That is
depending on traffic. Yeah, depending on traffic and weather and road condition, it could take me up to 2 hours. So that puts a burden on people that have to come to Pikeville, and that's always a big issue here in terms of infrastructure is better roads. That's always a complaint, and most likely always will be a complaint for obvious reasons. So yeah, I mean that's an interesting thing why they have through the years left this county as large as it is, but it is a large county.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned travel and all that, and I mean it really literally I could be in 3 different counties in 15 minutes probably. 20 minutes I could be in 5 different counties that surround Lincoln. It doesn't take me that long to, in 5 minutes I could be in Rockhouse County, but that's just, if I was to go to Boyle County, it doesn't take long. That's a whole county over, but it does not take long.
But it doesn't take long, see, because your roads are a little better, and that's not to say we have good roads here. We have north south 4-lane highway, east west 4-lane highway. We have US 460 that runs towards Grundy, Virginia, that's near completion. As a 4-lane highway. We have US 119 and US 23. We have all of those as 4-lane highways. I mean, I can get on them within 5 minutes of my house here. But I can be to Virginia or West Virginia in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I can be there. I can be to the state line in the way that you're talking being in Boyle County. Or less. I can be in Floyd County in 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah. Well, like
I can be in Letcher County.
Yeah. My my wife, she's from Perry County, and which you talk about. I guess going into the different communities. Her grandparents are in a community called Willard. Right there in her parents lived right there live. Her dad still lives there, right in the middle of Hazard, basically, a little bit on the outside, but getting from her house to her grandparents' house was a good 20-30 minute drive, and her cousin got married, or we went to Buckhorn once, and it was.
So if you're going from Hazard to Buckhorn, that's a good hour.
Yeah, it was a.
Pat Wooten used to be the mayor over there. Pat is a friend of mine. Used to be sheriff of Perry County. He was from Buckhorn. He worked for Congressman Rogers for a number of years after that. But he was from Buckhorn. But so it's going to Leatherwood, another community. Yeah. So the terrain makes that the
big
issue.
Difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
With Pike County, I was able to find out a few about the early explorers as far as that goes, and I got all my information from the Kentucky Encyclopedia. But I guess some of the first explorers of European descent was Major Andrew Lewis. He had a explorer group that came in 1756, which I was thinking that's right around when Thomas Walker was coming.
Through the Cumberland Gap.
Yeah, through the Cumberland Gap, yeah. But then Boone, it's rumored that Boone was there as well on Shelby Creek in 1767. And then I have that Enoch Smith. Does that ring a bell? He built a horse pen on Upper Johns Creek. That is, the encyclopedia even said that wasn't really confirmed, but that's I guess a rumor if you want to say it that way.
Yeah, so Daniel Boone did not take his first steps through the Cumberland Gap. Daniel Boone, and we've got a historical marker in Elkhorn City. I don't know if that marker was there when you visited Elkhorn City, but there's a historical marker about Daniel Boone's first steps in Kentucky were in Elkhorn City, Kentucky, and they were able to verify that to be valid, and were able to prove that out to the point that they have a historical marker there. Yeah, and so that was verified that he took a hunting trip through to what is now Elkhorn City in 1767 through 68. They say that he hunted along the Clinch River, which was in, at the time, Virginia, later became the Russell Fork of the Big Sandy. He actually followed the rim of the Breaks Canyon. The Breaks Interstate Park is there. And it led him into Elkhorn City. He then went, marker here, I've got it pulled up now, said that he went then 50 miles on down to a Salt Lick on a buffalo trace to what is now David, Kentucky, which is in Floyd County.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. A lot of people
and so
assume...
he spent the winter there. He spent the winter there, and then went back. I guess over the same route. So his first steps in Kentucky, as I was taught, was coming through the Cumberland Gap, and then obviously up to present day where Boonesboro and that area, the central part of the state, and that is not accurate.
Nope. Wow.
He was actually in eastern Kentucky in this part of the country first, and spent time there in 17. Now, he may have been here earlier, but his first official documented steps were in Pike County, Kentucky.
Well, that is pretty cool. It is sometimes said every state or every county in Kentucky probably has some sort of claim to Boone.
Yeah.
But being the first place he was first is it's pretty cool. That's pretty cool, and
it's pretty cool. You grow up, being in Kentucky, you hear about Daniel Boone and the impact he had, and the story is that he obviously was surveying.
Yeah.
And part of what they these explorers, right? They would survey, and they would get to claim large tracts of land.
Yeah.
And so the story is that Boone surveyed out what's now that whole swath of Elkhorn, that area of Elkhorn City, I guess, in this trip or maybe subsequent trips, but he didn't get his deed recorded.
Yeah.
Life lessons. And the gentleman that came around behind him surveyed, and he supposedly got his deed recorded first, and so he gets credited with obviously being the first settler in Elkhorn City. But that being said, obviously Boone left Kentucky and went to Missouri some years later, and they say one of the reasons that is that he felt he was cheated in the court in this dispute. There was, I guess, a lawsuit or something. I don't know any of the deeds, but that's kind of the story. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but it makes for good folklore, right?
Yeah. And it's always said that Boone was ready to move away as soon as somebody else, or he said it as soon as he sees fire or smoke from somebody else's chimney, it's time to move farther away.
He was the ultimate off-grid off-grid guy, right?
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, he left Kentucky and went to Missouri, and I guess he ate too many sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
As the story goes, and died from eating too many sweet potatoes. But anyway, so, but he was the first explorer, and the first steps he took was in Kentucky.
That's
in 1767.
That's really cool, and it's a big misconception that people probably get. I mean, I would say about everybody assumes that he came, through the Cumberland Gap at that time. Was his first time.
I've always wondered why that. Obviously you can correct the historical record. I mean, that's part of the study of history, right? Is to get to the actual fact, and things are revealed years later with new documents, right?
Yeah.
But I always thought, well, we're always kind of the stepchildren of the state in Eastern Kentucky, and Central Kentucky had to lay claim to him first, right? So he had to just completely jumped over the whole eastern part of the state. Right? There's no way he could have actually been here first. So he had to be in Fayette County. God forbid he would not go to Lexington first. Right? So,
Oh,
He flew into Bluegrass Airport or something.
that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So Boone. I mean, he didn't obviously settle here, but yeah. So that was kind of the first, I guess, foray of European settlers into the state. Well, I imagine that there's been people previous that we just don't know about. I do think there's some credence to the theories that you're now seeing about Viking and Irish explorers being here centuries before. You know,
Yeah.
I'm just quite confident that's true. We just can't prove that.
Well, and you know, if you want to talk about Native Americans as well, I would assume, would the Cherokee be the most prominent, I guess, in that area, or do you know as far as that
Well,
goes?
it was kind of the happy hunting ground, right? It was kind of a mixture of different tribes. You had the northern, like the Shawnee, and the Cherokee, predominantly here, and while I'm not exactly sure where we live, they have found repeated evidence of some type of settlement here. They actually, when they were doing the subdivision, not on on my property here, but in the house lots behind me closer to the river, they actually found 3 or 4 bodies that were buried there.
Yeah.
And they excavated the site. They found pottery and arrowheads, and this was some kind of central gathering point. And if you look at it from an aerial shot, our location geographically is that we're kind of in a really wide open spot of the valley, and you had a couple of major creeks, streams feeding into the river here. The river was fairly, and I'm basing this on what the river looks like now, but the river was fairly shallow and not very rocky.
Yeah.
Which would have been great for, fishing and lots of other things. The idea is that they come in here in different times of the year, would travel in from like Southern Ohio, Carolinas, Tennessee, right? And just kind of come in here and hunt and trap and all that. And then they would go back to wherever they, right? I don't really know how many of them actually lived here full time.
Yeah. And that's one thing, that's another debate that I've heard, I guess, coming up, people speculating that, there could have been Native Americans living here, before they decided to just leave it as a hunting ground. At some point, again, and when you talked about this earlier, and I meant to mention it, if you can get a journal or something that has somebody's journal of when they were traveling, that's a great resource. But like, some of those early explorers didn't keep a journal. Native American artifacts or written language is not really documented or they didn't have a documented written language as the Europeans did. So those kind of things are things that I always wish we had, but those we just don't. So
well, it was odd that you mentioned that the Cherokee obviously were the first really of the tribes to create an alphabet. And we were down in Gatlinburg a few weeks ago. My wife and I were, and we went to the Museum of the Cherokee there in Cherokee, North Carolina. It was fairly interesting. They talked a lot about the development of the alphabet. So yeah, that's always kind of fascinating me. The fact that most of their tradition was oral tradition. But to your point about, I left out the other, which was the Chickasaw tribe.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's odd that we don't have any tribes in Kentucky. We're about one of the only states. I don't know how many more there would be, but we're about one of the only states
that doesn't have.
We have no tribe,
Yeah.
tribal land,
Tribal council.
nothing, right?
Yeah.
No kind of entity
Huh.
of right. If you think
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
and I hadn't really thought about that, but I've done some work with some of the Sioux tribes up in
Yeah.
the Dakotas,
Yeah.
and have talked to them a little bit about that. In the context of, they said they like Mitch McConnell. I'm like, why do you like Mitch McConnell? And I said, a lot of people in the state of Kentucky don't like Mitch McConnell.
You don't find that often.
And they like, and in terms of liking him from the standpoint of, I guess, assistance. And they said, well, he has no Indian tribes, so there is no real conflicts for him to help us.
Huh. Well.
And they yeah. So I was a little shocked at that, and and I thought, well, there's no political motivation not to help them, right?
Yeah.
There's no conflict with any state, so yeah. So I mean, in general, our senator's been good to the Native Americans, and I think for the most part. So so we have no tribes. Wow. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, considering that there's always this debate about did they have permanent settlement in Kentucky or not, and maybe they didn't.
Yeah,
right?
Well, and too, you hear so many stories of Native American raids and just the conflict between the early pioneers and the Native Americans. A lot of, I guess, the dark and bloody ground here in Kentucky, but yet there was there's no if there's no tribal, there was no tribal headquarters or tribal councils or anything to that nature. That's pretty interesting.
Well, and there too, in this work in Mississippi, I've kind of studied a little bit about that. And so the Mississippi tribes, obviously the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, all those, their tribal lands would stretch way up into Kentucky. Yeah, so they would include in that Mississippi kind of territory, at least the western central part of Kentucky. So I think they kind of, because you have so many different tribes, as I said, the Cherokee and Shawnee were the ones that we kind of learned about here, but the Chickasaw, there are a couple of other tribes that starts with the M. Massapequa and the Yuchi tribe. Yeah. I've never heard of either one of those. So the idea maybe is that they just kind of had a understanding that we'll hunt and do our thing over here, and you do your thing over there, and and that's it, right? Let's try to keep trouble down between our respective nations. In that. So
we're going to wrap it up for now for Pike County history. We'd like to thank Roger Ford for coming on the show and sharing his knowledge of his native county. We'll be back next week for more Pike County history. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.